The United Nations Security Council has passed a resolution that demands an end to Israeli settlements in Palestinian territory. The United States abstained from the vote, defying calls for a veto from Israel and Donald Trump. UN Ambassador for the United Nations, Samantha Power, spoke after the vote.
The United States has been sending the message that the settlements must stop privately and publicly for nearly 5 decades. Through the administrations of President Lyndon B. Johnson, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and now Barack Obama. Indeed, since 1967, the only president who had not had at least one Israeli-Palestinian-related Security Council resolution pass during his tenure is Barack Obama. So our vote today is fully in line with the bipartisan history of how American presidents have approached both the issue and the role of this body. We believe, though, that continued settlement building seriously undermines Israel's security. Some may cast the U.S. vote as a sign that we have finally given up on a two-state solution. Nothing could be further from the truth. None of us can give up on a two-state solution. We continue to believe that that solution is the only viable path to provide peace and security for the state of Israel and freedom and dignity for the Palestinian people.
Responses on Twitter have been varied. President-elect Donald Trump tweeted, "As to the UN, things will be different after January 20th. While J Street, a Jewish lobby group which supports a two-state solution, praised the vote, tweeting, "Every U.S. president since 1967 has opposed settlement expansion in the West Bank. President Obama upheld this trend today." Earlier, I spoke with CBS News foreign affairs analyst Pamela Falk, who was at the UN vote.
Well, the U.S. Ambassador Samantha Power made the point that in 2011 the U.S. vetoed a UN resolution that focused solely on settlements. But, she said, times have changed and there are more Israeli settlements, and her point was that it undermines efforts to achieve a two-state solution. Now, this, of course, was despite frenzied pleas by Israel to veto the resolution or delay it, and calls the resolution calling for a halt to Israeli settlements. But by abstaining, the U.S. allowed the UN resolution to pass.
And so, Pamela, give us a sense now, because this, of course, as you well know, is a transition period here where you have President Obama less than a month left in office. You have President-elect Donald Trump less than a month away from his inauguration. Where does this leave the United States' position, particularly as we've learned that the president-elect himself had an active role in discussing this with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and even Egypt's President el-Sisi?
Yes, absolutely. The U.S. ambassador made a point that the Obama administration has supported Israel all along, agreed to give Israel, she said, $38 billion to the military over the next 10 years. But in the end, the flurry of diplomatic activity, including calls from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with President-elect Trump and with President-elect Trump with the Egyptian President el-Sisi, really pitted the Obama administration against the incoming President-elect Trump administration, saying that the new administration would have vetoed it or not allowed it to even take place. And so even though the U.S. has in the past supported Israel on almost everything, their point was that this actual resolution that calls for a halt, it says that settlements have no legal validity, that this particular resolution must go through, even though they didn't vote for it. They abstained because continued settlement activity undermines Israel's security, and that was the point.
So what are the real-world practical implications of this, Pamela? Are there any?
The real-world practical implications are, it is the Obama administration's parting statement that Israel should stop the settlement activity, which under international law is considered illegal, and that they should get back to negotiations, which, of course, in the next month they will be unable to do. It's also a statement to the incoming Trump administration that it's very important to rein in, at least as far as this administration is concerned, the settlement continuation. And so we know from statements from the new U.S. ambassador designate under the President-elect Trump that there's going to be more settlement, support for settlements. There's going to be a support for the move of the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and even some doubt about a two-state solution. So this was the Obama administration's end statement, legacy statement, that this is how they feel, very supportive of Israel, but very critical of the settlements, and it will likely be changed after January 20th.
Pamela, you touched on it there in spelling out some of the incoming administration's likely positions when it comes to the Middle East and Israel. I wonder what, if you take a step back from today's vote, what may change here realistically? We've heard Mr. Trump, for instance, talk about his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, perhaps being one who could help along the peace process and achieve what has eluded so many other world leaders, and that is peace in the Middle East between Israelis and Palestinians. What else may change? What have we gotten signals about already regarding the incoming administration's posture towards Israel?
Well, Elaine, we got a very strong signal about the U.S. Incoming administration's relationship with Egypt, because in a conversation with President-elect Trump, the Egyptian president, we don't know if they spoke about this resolution, but we know they spoke about continuing Egypt's role as a broker in the Middle East peace process, and as a result, Egypt actually came off the resolution as a sponsor, and what happened was 4 other countries came in. But it meant that Egypt was conceding the point, even though they voted for it in the end, that they were not going to go against the incoming Trump administration on their interest in moving the ball forward by being that much closer with Israel.
And where does this leave the Palestinians? We've talked a little bit about the Israeli side of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the lobbying efforts that took place ahead of this UN Security Council vote. Where does this now leave the Palestinians?
Well, the Palestinian representative here was very pleased with the fact that it passed at the UN, and they were part of a letter to the 4 countries, which included New Zealand and Malaysia and Senegal and Venezuela, to co-sponsor it and actually get the vote going. So the Palestinians feel that in terms of international law and the UN, it's on the record that the Obama administration allowed it to pass, as did the other world powers, France and the UK, who had been very supportive in the past of Israel. So the Palestinians feel this is a major victory in a certain sense, that the UN has passed it, and they're going to have bilateral talks with the new incoming administration to see if there's any way to get talks back to a two-state solution. That one's very much up in the air.
All right. Pamela Falk, our CBS News foreign affairs analyst, thank you so much for providing us with that context and perspective.